Hello, Dave here with emergencyprepguy.com. I appreciate you stopping by. Today is kind of a somber topic. It's a hot day, so I'm sitting here under the shade here. I hope the lighting's okay. But I wanted to talk about, I wanted to basically put kind of a warning out there because I think some really serious situations are coming our way. So I've got a tablet here with a bunch of notes. I've never done a video like this before, so I'll be looking down at my notes quite a bit. But please try to stay with me. Try to watch this video all the way to the end. I think this is very, very important. And some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here, even though I'm going to stay in generalities, could save some people's lives. So, anyway, I honestly believe that the best times of the United States is behind us. And I know that's a sad thing to hear somebody say. What do I mean by that? I really think that we're going into a Great Depression. It's at least a very severe recession, much worse than the 2008 that we went through. I mean, much, much worse. It's already much worse than the 2008, in my opinion, and going there fast. I'm not an expert. I'm not licensed to be giving anybody, so I'm not trying to give anybody any financial advice or legal advice or anything like that. So that's my disclaimer there. But here are the very real possibilities that are staring us in the face, and I'm not talking a year or 2 years from now. I'm talking a month or 2 months from now. First is food shortages. I'm going to list all three, and then we'll go through and I'll talk about each one. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. All of this stuff, all you can do, I mean, if you want to research this stuff yourself, matter of fact, I want you to research this stuff yourself. I'm very limited what I can say. I don't want to get in trouble with this YouTube video. And so I really encourage you guys to research this stuff yourself. And please comment below this video, especially as we talk about some of the ways to prepare. If you know of other ways to prepare than what I've mentioned, I'd really like below this video it to become a dialogue for you guys to give each other resources to prepare and give each other information and also documentation for the things that you've researched and found, because I think this is really, really super important. So anyway, first thing is food shortages. Second thing is fuel, specifically diesel shortages. I don't have a diesel truck, and I forget the little additive that you have to add that's right next to the fuel when you put diesel fuel in. It starts with a D. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. I'll look it up and I'll list that up on the camera there. But anyway, that's getting in really short supply. The other thing is electricity blackouts. I've heard a lot about electrical blackouts coming this summer and even more severely this winter, from different, alternative media sources and stuff. But I guess what really made it seem really confirmed it, I guess, in my in my mind, is I'm starting to hear it from distributors and different companies that I know that have business contacts in the supply chain that are basically telling me that they're preparing for rolling blackouts in different parts of the United States this summer. If they have that, now the only reason that you would have, the way I understand it, the only reason you would have rolling blackouts, which means power off for a while, then power on, then power off, then power on. The only reason that you would have something like that is if there's a shortage of either the fuels needed to generate the electricity, like diesel. A lot of the electrical grids are run by diesel. Coal is another one. But anyway, we'll get into more of that as we get going. So now let's go through those three: food shortages, fuel, diesel shortages, and electricity shortages, blackouts. Let's go through just again some generalities, reasons for each of those. First, let's start with food shortages. There's obviously a conflict going on between two countries right now, a war, and both of those countries export a lot of grain and a lot of fertilizer. One of them can't really export anything right now. The other one is refusing to export to unfriendly countries, basically meaning the West. And so there's going to be just from that particular, the bigger country supplies a third of the oil and natural gas to Europe, and they're a major world supplier, supplying lots of other countries, and they're not going to supply or sell that. There's a few countries that are have made deals outside of the EU and said, hey, we don't want to go along with the EU, please sell to us, we'll pay in rubles. And so there's some backdoor deals, so some of the countries are getting supplied, but most are not getting that now, or won't soon. Now the next thing is, and I'm just going to say JB, you'll know who that is, issued an order. This was a couple of months ago. Issued an order telling railroads not to ship fertilizer. The reason I heard about that is because there was a couple of the major fertilizer companies that put out notices to various farmers saying that they wouldn't be able to get their orders because of this order from the an instruction from the administration. They said anything that's currently already in transit you'll get, but anything that hasn't been shipped, we can't ship it to you right now. And that's the main way that fertilizer gets shipped, because it's so heavy. It costs a lot more to ship it if you're shipping it by truck, and both truck and rail is run by diesel. So that was one thing. There's little I don't really want to call it rumors, but in the alternative media there I've heard reports of this, and then I've heard private citizens confirm this and say, yeah, we were, but apparently there's the government is paying some farmers to slaughter their animals, and other farmers to not produce their crops, and so that's going to add to the food shortage. There's the flu, the bird related flu, where a lot of chicken and turkey have died and or been slaughtered because of supposedly having that. There's an unbelievable amount. The last number I heard was 95. If you've got more recent numbers on this and documentation of it, again, please post it below in the comments. But the last number I heard was 95 food processing plants burning within like the last year to 2 years, mostly within the last year. And I saw a graph where there was like, that just like never happens, and then just all of a sudden, just all of them within the last year plus, which just various kinds of food processing plants getting burnt to the ground. To me, that seems kind of suspicious. Another freak thing, I don't know what caused this. I haven't heard anybody reporting what caused it, but apparently 10,000 cattle died. And right before doing this video, I was looking up some of the things for this, and I forgot to look up what state that was in. I keep thinking Nebraska, but that may not be the correct state. If you just Google 10,000 cattle died, you'll be able to bring that up, and it'll tell you where that was at and the details. There's also countries like India's one. I can't remember, Pakistan. There's several countries. I don't, maybe not been Pakistan, but anyway, yeah, I know India was one of them. But there's several countries that have made announcements in the last month to 2 months saying that because of world food shortages, they're not going to be exporting any of their grains, and so that will add to the problem. But it's probably smart on their part, because they're saving that for their own people. So that was one thing there. Now let's get into the diesel fuel shortages, specifically diesel. I had one guy, this was an alternative media source, and he was talking to some of his government contacts, and off the record, basically what they told him was it isn't going to be a matter of how much diesel costs, but whether or not people can actually get it. It's going to be that in that short of supply. Another thing is right when JB took office, he halted or stopped the Keystone Pipeline, which brought a lot of oil into the United States. And then another thing that JB did is he this was a while back, like 6 months ago, or actually it's been clear back since he came into office, but he's been kind of doing it as we go along there, and that is he halted a bunch of, basically what he did first was he stopped any new oil drilling permits from being issued. And then just about a month and a half ago, he actually, I heard that he started canceling some existing oil drilling permits, in the United States. On the news you hear, oh, I'm doing everything I can, it's that other country's fault. I'm doing everything I can to bring oil prices down, but that says one thing, does another. So the other thing that I've heard is the bigger country in that conflict that we talked about a minute ago, they supply a third of the oil and natural gas to Europe, and other than the few side deals they made, my understanding is at first it was they weren't going to sell it unless they sold it, unless the people were willing to pay for it in that country's currency. But recently I've just heard that they've decided, just if you're an enemy to I'm not going to say the name of the company country. If you're an enemy or an unfriendly country, we're not going to sell to you at all. So, and that includes a lot of food, grains, oil and natural gas, fertilizers, things like that. Okay, so let's see. JB reportedly recently, and this was just like a week ago, I think, or at least I heard about it a week ago, shipped some of U.S. Oil reserves. Apparently, we're getting towards the end of our oil reserves too, but JB shipped a bunch of those to Europe to help Europe, when, in my opinion, he should have kept it here. And the other thing I've heard, and this happened during the previous administration to the one that we have now, and that was back then the price of gas and diesel and all that was so low that several refineries were actually paid to switch to biodiesel, and so now they're not set up to refine crude oil. So that's just another thing that could affect the situation. Now the third, let's talk about electricity outlets. If you've ever looked at a map, you can Google this. There's maps you can see online of the different grids in the United States. If the grid goes down, it's not just going to affect your city. It could affect in some cases multiple states, and so it's a serious integrated system. But anyway, during the three presidents ago, that administration that was in for 8 years, served 2 terms, basically shut down much of the coal industry. The president after him tried to reverse a bunch of that, but the current president has reversed that again. And so pretty much it's the coal industry is shut down and being shut down, which produces a lot of our electricity. We already talked about the diesel shortages and some reasons for that. A lot of our power grids are, a lot of our electricity is produced by diesel, burning diesel. And you can research this on your own. I don't remember the details, just enough to probably get in trouble here, but I'll mention it anyway. When the Texas had that power outage 2 winters ago, my understanding was they had plenty of backup diesel and ability to produce power to keep their grid up, but they received an order from the federal government telling them they weren't allowed to use their backup fossil fuel backups. They had to depend on their windmill and that kind of stuff, the alternative solar and that kind of stuff, because clouds coming over affects the solar, wind slowing down. I mean, it's not as reliable as burning a fuel. And so a lot of that problem was unnecessary, apparently. The next thing is, mentioned this already kind of, but the other problem with our electrical grid is a lot of where we have invested in windmills and solar and stuff, that a lot of that again is inefficient and less than reliable. And then the last thing, like for example, Lake Mead is a good example of how that's just, the water level is just dropping. There's droughts in the West, and a lot of the West states, a lot of the electricity is also produced by water power. And if the water is down, not only is it going to cause water shortage for drinking in farms and stuff like that, but it can also affect the ability to produce hydroelectrical power. So those are just, again, I'm trying to stick to just generalities. Let's talk about what you can do. Obviously, you need to get prepared. And they say, what do you need? You need clean air, clean water, food, and in some cases you need a backup source of electricity. As far as water, if you have the ability, if you live out on some acreage and you have the ability, you have a well, or you have the ability to dig a well, I would do that. If you have a well, I would try to get backup parts and put them in EMP bags so that they're protected in case of an EMP, and just have everything that you need to be able to change out your well pump if for some reason it gets fried by an EMP or just wears out and goes bad. If you don't have a well and have the ability to get a well, even if you're in town, if you're in an area where the water table hasn't dropped, like I was talking to a really good friend of mine in kind of south central Utah, and he was telling me that they can't really drill wells. The farmers that drill wells have wells there now are having to drill their wells a lot deeper than they were because the water table is just dropping in the ground terrible. But if you are in a place where the water table, you're not having that problem, still you don't want to depend on city water. If you can drill a well, that's my big worry here, living in the city here, is I tried hand digging a well. I was going to try to go down 30 feet last fall. I think I got down about 12, 13, 14 feet, and it just got I was digging it with one of those post hole diggers, like you can twist and then you got to pull. You get extensions for it. You got to pull it out, and it was digging fine until I got down that deep, and it just got so hard. Like 4 or 5 hours of digging, and I maybe went down a half an inch. So I need to come up with a better method. And where I'm at, I'm kind of in a there's a river that goes through here, and so flooding is a potential issue too. But in theory, I should be able, the water table should be fairly high, except this is a desert. Anyway, I talked to a well driller, and he said there's also a layer of rock at a certain depth. If the water is below that, that I wouldn't be able to find water, in 30 feet. So that's a big problem. So, but there's things like rainwater capturing. You can get, and that's something that I'm going to be working on, setting up a rainwater capture system. There's things like that you can do. You can still buy water barrels. I was looking on the internet. There's still 5,000, 10,000 gallon tanks that you can buy. Set those suckers in your backyard and just fill them up. If you got a freezing problem, you could dig a hole and partially or completely bury it. I know some people are doing that. Or you could just run a bird bath kind of de-icer in it. You'll have to check out how. I haven't researched that out. That was just one idea that I had, but you would want to research and before you did something like that, depended on it, depending on how cold it gets where you're at, whether or not that many gallons or however many gallons you got, whether that would keep it warm or not, enough to keep it from freezing. But we're going to need to have backup water. That's probably the biggest thing. Even if we're growing gardens, we got to have the ability to water our gardens. We got to have the ability to drink and deal with sanitation and all of that kind of stuff. Food. Now this is super, super important too. I'm going to put on the screen here. There's a company I mentioned. I don't get any benefit from this. A couple of the things I'm going to refer to here, I will get a little bit of a kickback on, but most of them I won't. But I don't really care because I'm just wanting everybody to get prepared. But Rainy Day Foods, I don't get any kickback from them. They're in southern Idaho, but they're one of the companies that I found when I was researching. And you might find local sources in your own area for these things, but this is one that I found that was designed for people to eat wheat and other food storage items, more basics as opposed to much freeze dried. But I, particularly I'm talking. There's going to be a major wheat shortage in the world, and so wheat is like a famine food. You want to get, and it's cheaper than buying, a lot of the freeze dried. you want to get a bunch of wheat and store it somewhere in your house in a cool place. I'd probably get 7 years supply or something for you and all your loved ones, and just have it. Worst case scenario, you'll be able to trade it for other things. But anyway, you want to get wheat, and you want to get all of the ingredients. I would get an electric wheat grinder and a decent, you can do a fair amount, hand crank wheat grinder. All of the ingredients that you need to be able to make bread. I would call them also for animals like chickens. You don't want the kind of wheat that they're going to plant for seed if they treat it with fertilizer. Some of the seed is wheat seed is pre-treated, not fertilizers. What's it called? Insecticides. Some of the wheat is pre-treated with insecticides. You obviously don't want to get that. So ask that before you buy it. But a lot of times in local grain mills and so forth, you can buy wheat that's not for human consumption, meaning it's not cleaned. Still might have some rocks and stuff like that in it, but it's whole grain, hasn't been ground, and you can get that stuff still amazingly cheap. Your chickens and your quail will live on that stuff. Their egg production might drop a little bit. If you get the hard red wheat, it's high enough in protein. They'll live on it. They'll still produce eggs. They're, like I said, it might drop a little bit, but they'll survive on it. They'll still produce eggs for you. They'll grow. They'll be healthy. So that's a good alternative way. And then obviously for chickens, free range as much as you can helps them too. I like to free range them a lot because then they don't hardly eat any of their feed. Then you're going to want water and food. You're going to want to get backups of that, and think about it. If you're prepared and you don't need it, great. But who wants to look at their little kids or their little grandkids and tell them they don't have anything to feed them? This is something that you really need to take serious and get some preparations together. Time is running out. I'm talking today. Get going on it. The next thing is, set up a garden. You don't have to have. I highly recommend the Mittlighter garden like that, because you're supposed to be able to produce 6 times as much food. That's what my friend from LDS Prepper, his experiment was. He said he produced 6 times as much actual volume of food for the same amount of space, and it conserves water the way that everything is set up there. So I would recommend that, but regardless, get a big garden spot going, and if you have rabbits and chickens, you've got a source of fertilizer. By the way, raising your own rabbits, I think is, especially if you're in a neighborhood, if you're out in the country, you can get cattle and other things. Those are going to be very expensive though, by the way. But rabbits reproduce like rabbits. It doesn't take, with one buck and a couple of does, you can literally keep your family in all of the meat protein that they need. With chickens, you got all the eggs you could ever want. And so I highly recommend, and those are really efficient and don't take a lot. Another nice thing about rabbits is you can feed them on garden scraps, grains. You can feed them on yard waste and things like that if you have to. There's lots of videos on YouTube where you can search how to you can also store hay for the rabbits, so that you've got a food storage for rabbits. And you can, like I was going to say a minute ago, you can search. There's lots of videos where they teach you a good diet out of your backyard for your rabbits. maybe we'll do a video on that pretty soon, but there's lots of them out there already. Backup generators, if you're somewhere where you're living with propane and you got like a 500 gallon tank, if they're not too expensive already, get a couple 1,000-gallon tank and fill the sucker up. Propane's gonna only go up in price, I think. I don't think, at least in the foreseeable future, I don't see it coming down. If you have the means to do it, even in neighborhoods, most cities that I've researched at least will allow you to have propane tanks. You can even bury them. I think they got to be 10 foot away from a boundary and from a structure, but you can bury propane tanks. And if you get natural gas now, it's not hard to convert your appliances over to propane. My theory on that would be learn how to make the switch on your appliances, make the switch, test it out, and then make the switch back, and use, but just so you know how to do it all, and use natural gas till we don't have natural gas anymore, and then you've got propane as a backup. You can switch over. The fuels don't burn exactly the same, which is why you've got to know how to make the adjustments. I think propane burns hotter, and there's a few other differences. So raise a garden, raise your own meat. There was a preparedness expert I heard on a news interview not very long ago, and she was talking about most people look over something like rabbits or quail, producing your own meat, and for the amount of especially rabbits where they can produce off of your own yard, it's for the effort and time that you put into it, you get I guess what I'm saying is the resource cost and effort ratio to calorie is higher than what you would get out of a garden. So when you're living off your own food, the more calories you can get, fats and oils and things that will sustain you. I'm not knocking plants, they're super important too, obviously, but you can get more. You'll feel fuller, your life will be a little bit better if you have the ability to produce your own meat. So I really recommend you looking into that. And then I mentioned backup generators. If you have propane, a way to store propane, and you can get a dual fuel generator where you can run it off of propane, that's an option because that's easier to store than gasoline or diesel. Super easy to store. Hopefully, if you're going to buy that, you've already bought it. I know people that have like 10,000 gallons of diesel stored, and they bought it back when it was $2.50 a gallon or whatever it was. So anyway, that's about all that I have in the notes. Again, I just really want to suggest or recommend that you really take these things serious. If you're like me, you've heard that it's important to be prepared. Probably most of your life. Probably now is the most time to do it. I was talking with my wife the other day, and we believe, I'm not trying to get religious on you, but we believe in God, and we feel like we've been warned so many times in our life, if we're not prepared, it's our own fault. So anyway, I hope this is helpful to you. Below this video, I'll also put links to the supplies, a lot of the supplies and stuff that I've talked about. There's a really good electric wheat grinder. I'll put a link to that below this video in case that's helpful. And also link a hand one because I think you need to have both. I'll put a link to a company, and this is one I do get some kickbacks for, but if you don't want to buy from that, or you want to go your own link, I don't really care. Just get prepared. But this is a particular company that has lots of backup solar generators. And then I'll also link another company where they're much cheaper, and they have them in stock. I just don't think they're the quality of the first one. I got the first one, but with that company, because they're such good quality, you have to wait like they're like back order. You can still get them, but you got to wait like a month to get them. So I would get your orders placed right away. That's portable solar something. Anyway, I'll put the link below the video. And then the other one, I can't remember the name of the company, but I'll put a link to that one too, and I'll label it. But that one, the reason I suggest them is because they at least got something that is in stock that you can order. So with that, I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you sitting and listening to me. Probably not the most exciting video I've ever done. I'm just sitting here reading from my notes, but I think this is all super, super important stuff. So again, thanks for watching the video, especially those that made it all the way to the end. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you in the next video.